I still think about that night. Some part of me wants to believe I imagined it, that the mind plays tricks on you when you're a kid staying up too late. But deep down, I know what I saw. I know what was in that house with us. Ryan and I had been best friends since kindergarten, the kind of friendship where you don't even remember how it started, just that it always was. We were 16, spending another Friday night the way we always did, stuffing our faces with junk food, playing video games, and talking about dumb things like which teacher at school was secretly an alien. Ryan's house was in Flagstaff, Arizona, tucked into one of those quiet, suburban neighborhoods where every house looked the same, and the only sounds at night were the distant hum of the freeway and the occasional dog barking at shadows. His parents were the friendly but strict type. They let us stay up late but made it clear we had to keep it down. That night, around midnight, the house had settled into a thick silence. The TV's glow was the only thing keeping the living room from feeling like a cave. Ryan stretched and tossed his controller onto the couch. "All right, man, I'm getting tired of this," he said. "Let's do something else." I smirked. "Like what? It's not like we can go anywhere." He grinned. "Hide and seek." I raised an eyebrow. "Dude, we're 16, not 6. Come on, the house is dark and my parents are asleep. We make it a challenge. No lights, just instincts. Best hiding spot wins." I sighed, but stood up anyway. "Fine, but you count first." Ryan nodded, pulling out his phone. 30 seconds, no parents' room, no going outside. Go. I took off down the hall, my heart racing with a weird mix of excitement and something else I couldn't quite place. The laundry room was too obvious, the pantry too cramped. Then I spotted the downstairs bathroom. Small, but if I crouched behind the shower curtain, I could disappear into the darkness. I slipped inside, easing the door shut without a sound. My breathing slowed. The air was thick with the scent of lavender soap and something faintly musty. I crouched behind the shower curtain, pulling it just enough to give me a sliver of a view of the bathroom. The house was silent. Too silent. I held my breath, listening for Ryan's footsteps. Then I heard something else, a rustling sound. Not outside, not in the hallway, inside the bathroom. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing, the AC kicking in, the pipes settling, maybe even my own breath echoing in the small space. But then the rustling came again, deliberate and slow, like fabric shifting. I froze. My hands went clammy. The air felt thick, heavy. Then, before I could stop myself, I reached out just a little and pulled the curtain back an inch. There was a man standing by the sink. I sucked in a breath so sharp it felt like a blade against my throat. He was facing the mirror, his back half turned toward me, but I could see enough. A hoodie, dark jeans, a duffel bag in one hand. My mind screamed, but my body refused to move. I wanted to believe he was a trick of the light, some kind of hallucination brought on by too much sugar and not enough sleep. But he was real. Too real. His head twitched, like he just realized something was off. Slowly, he turned, and his eyes locked onto mine. Soft. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I gasped, then he ran. It happened so fast that I barely processed it. He spun toward the door, shoving it open so hard it smacked against the wall. I stumbled out of the tub, my legs barely working. "Ryan?" I screamed, my voice cracking. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway. Ryan burst in, eyes wide. "What the hell? There was someone in here," I shouted, grabbing his arm. He just ran. He heard it then. The back door slamming shut. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Ryan bolted toward the kitchen. I followed, my heart hammering. The back door was wide open, swinging gently on its hinges. The warm desert air drifted in, carrying with it the faint scent of dirt and something else, something sour, something human. Ryan's parents came stumbling down the stairs, bleary-eyed. His dad had a baseball bat in hand. "What's going on?" his mom demanded. We tried to explain, our voices stumbling over each other. Ryan's dad didn't waste time. He grabbed his phone and called the police. The cops arrived within minutes. They searched the backyard, the street, even checked the alley behind the fence. They found nothing. No footprints. No sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. It was probably just a burglar, one of the officers said, though he didn't sound convinced. Realized someone was home and took off. But I knew better. That man didn't just break in, he had been there. For how long? Had he been watching us play games, waiting for the right moment? Had he hidden inside before Ryan's parents even went to bed? I kept seeing his face, the way his eyes had widened when he saw me, like he hadn't expected me to be there, like I had ruined whatever he had planned. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me jolt. At 3 a.m., Ryan shook me awake. His face was pale, his phone in his hand. "Caleb," he whispered. I checked the back door. I sat up, heart pounding. "The lock wasn't broken," Ryan said. He swallowed hard. "It was unlocked." I stared at him. Someone unlocked it from the inside. My stomach turned to ice. Neither of us spoke after that, because we both knew what it meant. He hadn't just been in the house, he'd been there for a while, and we never heard him come in. I didn't sleep for days after what happened at Ryan's house. Every noise in my own home made me jump. Every shadow looked like it was stretching toward me. The thought that the man in the bathroom had been inside for God knows how long haunted me like a sickness. But life moved on, as it always does, and I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that nightmares couldn't hurt me. I told myself that it was just a burglar, a random break-in, and nothing more. I almost believed it. Until it happened again. And this time, it was even worse. It was a Friday night in Missoula, Montana, and I was at my friend Mason's house with Jake. We did what we always did. Loaded up on junk food, planted ourselves in front of the TV, and lost ourselves in video games. Mason's parents were out of town, which meant no rules, no curfews, just us and the endless glow of the screen. At some point, probably around midnight, we ran out of snacks. That was a problem. Mason groaned, stretching out on the couch. "Damn, we should have stocked up." Jake, ever the troublemaker, grinned. "There's a gas station down the road, you should go." Mason scoffed. "Hell no, I'm not going out alone at night." Jake turned to me. "Ethan, what about you? You're not scared, right?" The way he said it, taunting, knowing exactly what I'd been through just a couple weeks ago, made my stomach twist. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to walk alone in the dark, to feel that same creeping sensation I'd felt in Ryan's house, but I also didn't want them to think I was scared, so, like an idiot, I said, "Yeah, no problem." Mason tossed me a crumpled 20. "Get some chips, soda, maybe some candy. You know, essentials." Jake smirked. "And don't let the boogeyman get you." I flipped him off, grabbed my hoodie, and stepped outside. The night air was cold, colder than it should have been for September. The street was quiet, houses dark, most people already asleep. The gas station was only a few blocks away, a 5-minute walk at most. It shouldn't have been a big deal. I walked fast, hands shoved in my hoodie pockets, eyes flicking toward every rustling bush and shifting shadow. The glow of the gas station's fluorescent lights was a relief when I finally reached it. Inside, it was empty except for a guy at the register and some dude buying cigarettes. I grabbed chips, a few candy bars, and a 6-pack of soda. The cashier barely looked at me as I handed over the money. As I walked out, I noticed the car. It was an old sedan, dark-colored, parked across the street under a busted-out streetlight. Its engine was off. I hadn't seen it there before. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably someone who lived nearby, probably nothing. But then, as I started walking back toward Mason's house, I heard the engine start. I didn't look back right away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that after what happened at Ryan's, I was seeing danger everywhere. But the sound of the car idling behind me made my pulse pick up speed. I glanced over my shoulder. The car was moving, slowly, keeping pace with me. The street was still empty. No other cars, no people, just me and the sedan crawling along the curb like a predator stalking its prey. A cold knot of fear twisted in my gut. I picked up my pace. The car did too. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was someone just happening to drive the same way I was walking. Then the window rolled down. I looked again, and this time I saw him. The driver was a man in his 50s, scruffy, unshaven, his face shadowed in the dim light, but I could see his smile. It was wrong. Too wide, too eager. "Hey kid," he called out, his voice too friendly. "You need a ride?" I shook my head, forced myself to keep walking. "No, I'm good." The car kept pace with me. "Come on," the man said, still grinning. "It's late, not safe out here alone." Every instinct in my body was screaming. I kept moving, kept my eyes forward, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The man's voice dropped lower. "Don't be stupid," he said. "Just get in the car." I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was because, in that moment, I realized just how alone I was. The street was dark, the houses were quiet, and there was no one around to help me. I turned to face him. "No thanks," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. For a second, he just stared at me. Then he stopped the car. The door creaked open, and he stepped out. I didn't wait. I ran. I sprinted toward the nearest house with a porch light on, my sneakers slamming against the pavement, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I heard footsteps. The man was running too. I hit the front steps and pounded on the door. "Help!" I gasped, my voice shaking. "Please, there's someone—" A woman's voice, groggy from inside. "Who is it?" "Please," I begged. "Someone's following me." I risked a glance back. The man had stopped. He was standing near his car, staring at me. Then, as if he realized he wasn't going to get away with whatever he had planned, he turned and got back in. The engine roared to life. He sped off. The door swung open, and an older woman in a bathrobe stood there, her face etched with concern. "What's going on?" I tried to explain, but my words came out in a jumbled mess. She called the police. When the officers arrived, I told them everything. They searched the area, but the car was gone. No one had gotten a plate number. No cameras had caught him. And then the worst part. One of the cops looked at me and said, "You're lucky." Because a car matching that description had been reported in multiple attempted abductions over the past few weeks. Lucky. Because one of the victims had never been found. Lucky, because if I had hesitated just a little longer, if I had ignored that first uneasy feeling, if I had stopped in the wrong place, I wouldn't be here to tell you this story. That night, back at Mason's, I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, the unopened bag of chips still in my lap. Jake laughed. "Dude, what took you so long?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, hands shaking, trying to push down the realization that was clawing its way up my throat. Ryan's house wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I didn't talk about what happened that night in Missoula, not to Mason, not to Jake, not even to Ryan when he texted me later that week asking if I was okay. Because I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay since the man in Ryan's bathroom, and I sure as hell wasn't okay after the man in the car. Every night I'd lie in bed, listening to the silence of my house, waiting for something to break it. Footsteps, a door creaking open. The low rumble of an engine outside my window. Sleep didn't come easy anymore, and when it did, it brought nightmares. I told myself I was just paranoid. I told myself that bad luck had put me in the wrong place at the wrong time. Twice. But when it happened again, I knew this wasn't just paranoia. I wasn't imagining things. There was something out there, and this time, it wasn't just watching. It was following. It was a Saturday in late September, and I had gone to visit Lucas for the weekend. He lived in Bend, Oregon, in one of those houses that backed up to miles of dense forest. Lucas had always bragged about it, about how you could walk straight out of his backyard and into the woods like you were stepping into another world. He wasn't wrong. During the day, it was beautiful, but at night it turned into something else. Something that felt too big, too dark, too quiet, too empty. Or at least, that's what we thought. Lucas, Dylan, and Nico were already waiting for me when I got there. We were all 18, all convinced we were invincible, and when Lucas suggested we take a walk down an old abandoned trail, no one said no. "You sure it's safe?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual as we walked toward the tree line. Lucas laughed. "Dude, it's a hiking trail, not some haunted graveyard." Dylan grinned. "You scared, Ethan?" I smirked, shoving my hands into my hoodie pocket to keep them from shaking. "Nah, just making sure you guys don't wimp out when the ghost of some lost hiker comes looking for revenge." Nico chuckled, adjusting his backpack. As long as it's not one of those skinwalkers or whatever, I think we'll be fine. We stepped into the trees, and the air changed. The temperature dropped a few degrees, the wind stilled, and the sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of cars, the occasional bark of a dog, vanished. It was just us now. Just the four of us and the woods stretching out in every direction. Lucas led the way, flashlight in hand, the dirt path barely visible beneath our feet. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, joking, pushing each other, acting like we weren't all thinking the same thing, that it was too damn quiet. Dylan was the first to say it. "Where are the birds?" We stopped. He was right. No birds, no crickets, no wind, nothing. The air was thick, pressing against us like a weight. It was the kind of silence that felt unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Lucas forced a laugh. "Relax. It's probably just..." A twig snapped behind us. We all turned at the same time. Lucas lifted his flashlight, the beam cutting through the trees, illuminating nothing, just branches and darkness. Nico chuckled nervously. "Probably a deer," but I saw the way his fingers tightened around the straps of his backpack. We kept walking, but the energy had shifted. The joking stopped, the laughter faded. Every few steps I looked back, and every time I saw nothing. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, matching our pace. I stopped. "Did you hear that?" The others froze. Lucas turned, shining his light toward the trail behind us. "What?" I swallowed. "Footsteps." Dylan nodded slowly. I heard it too. Silence. Then, crunch. It was close. Too close. Lucas took a step back, his voice lower now. "Maybe we should head back." No one argued. We turned, walking faster now, the trail twisting and turning beneath our feet. I could hear my own breathing, hear the wind starting to move again, hear the faint rustling of leaves as we pushed forward. Then... "Wait!" Nico whispered sharply. "Listen!" We stopped. And we heard it. The footsteps didn't stop. They kept going, closer. I turned my head just in time to see a shadow move between the trees. My stomach dropped. "Dude," Dylan whispered. "There's someone." I never heard the rest of his sentence because at that moment, the footsteps broke into a sprint. And so did we. We ran. The flashlight bounced wildly as Lucas bolted ahead, the trees blurring together as we crashed through the undergrowth. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop, because behind us, something was chasing us. Something fast. Nico tripped. I heard him hit the ground hard. "Damn it!" I skidded to a stop, grabbing his arm, yanking him up. "Go! Go!" We didn't look back, we just ran. The trees broke apart, the lights from Lucas's house coming into view, and we burst into the backyard, gasping, shaking, slamming the back door behind us. Lucas locked it. We stood there, panting, staring out into the darkness. Nothing, just the trees, swaying gently in the wind. I could hear Dylan's ragged breathing beside me. Lucas swallowed. "What the hell was that?" No one answered. And then, as the adrenaline started to wear off, I felt it, that prickling sensation, that feeling you get when someone's watching you. I turned my head slowly, heart pounding, eyes drifting toward the window, and I saw him, standing at the tree line, just barely visible beyond the glow of the porch light. Tall, still, watching. I wanted to scream, but then... he moved, back into the trees, gone. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I went outside, the sunlight doing little to chase away the unease coiled in my gut. That's when I saw them. Footprints. They weren't ours. They led right up to the back door, and the worst part? They didn't go back. Whoever had been out there, they never left. The footprints outside Lucas's house haunted me for days. They led up to the back door, but they never went back. That was the part that got to me the most. Where did they go? Where did he go? Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened. Whoever had been out there, they were close. Close enough to step onto the porch, close enough to press their face to the glass, close enough to watch us while we slept. And yet, they vanished without a trace. I stopped sleeping through the night after that. It didn't matter where I was, in my own bed, on my couch, even in broad daylight. I kept thinking I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow moving in the trees, a figure at the edge of the parking lot, a glimpse of something in a rearview mirror that was gone when I turned my head. Paranoia, I told myself. Just paranoia. But that didn't make it go away, so when Noah invited me and Jordan over for the weekend in Des Moines, Iowa, I figured it would be a good distraction. He had just gotten a new mountain bike and wanted to test it out at night, tearing through the neighborhood with the wind in our faces. It sounded like fun. It sounded normal. It was anything but. We started riding around 10:30 p.m., just after Noah's parents had gone to bed. Ava, his 15-year-old neighbor, had tagged along at the last second, rolling up on an old bike that squeaked every time she hit a bump. The night was cool, the streets mostly empty except for the occasional porch light flickering through the trees. We rode fast, pushing each other, laughing, racing down the empty roads with nothing but the hum of our tires and the distant chirp of crickets. For a while, it felt good. I wasn't thinking about shadows in the trees or strangers standing outside windows. I was just riding, free and weightless, the way we all felt before we knew how dangerous the world really was. Then we saw the car. It was parked beneath a large oak tree, tucked in the shadows, barely visible in the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. An old, dark-colored sedan, the kind that had been on the road way too long, its paint dull, its front bumper dented. The windows were tinted, too dark to see inside. At first I didn't think much of it, just a random car on a random street. We sped past it, turning down another block. That's when Ava spoke up. "That car was giving me a weird vibe," she muttered. Jordan scoffed. "It's just a car." "Yeah, but it looked like it was off," she said, frowning, like someone was waiting in it. That made my stomach twist. I didn't say anything, but my hands tightened on the handlebars. We kept riding, cutting through a few side streets, but about 10 minutes later, I looked back, and I saw it again. The same car, now creeping down the street behind us. I swallowed hard. Guys," Noah glanced over his shoulder. "What the hell?" Ava's face paled. "That's the same car, right?" It was. It was following us. At first, it kept its distance, rolling along at a slow, lazy pace, like it was just coincidentally going the same way we were. But every time we turned, it turned too. Jordan laughed, but it was forced. "Okay, this is getting kind of creepy." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Let's head back to your house, Noah." We took the next right, pedaling faster now, my legs burning as I pushed harder, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I could hear the low hum of the engine, still there, still behind us. Ava's breathing was sharp and panicked. "It's still coming!" Noah veered onto a side street, cutting through a row of houses. We raced through the neighborhood, flying past darkened porches, past rows of sleeping houses, past empty driveways and silent sidewalks. And then, the headlights appeared again, coming from the opposite direction. My stomach dropped. The driver had cut us off. He knew these streets better than we did. Jordan cursed under his breath. "What the hell does he want?" I didn't want to find out. "Keep riding." We tore down the road, swerving onto the sidewalk, cutting across a neighbor's lawn, the grass slick beneath our tires. The car sped up. Ava gasped. "He's coming closer." I risked a glance back. The car wasn't just following us anymore. It was chasing us. And then the window rolled down. I saw the driver for the first time. A bald man, pale in the dim light, a scar slicing across his cheek. His eyes locked onto mine and he grinned. And then, he swerved. I yanked the handlebars, barely avoiding the curb as he cut across the street, trying to block us off. "Screw this," Noah yelled. "My house. Go." We bolted toward his driveway, ditching our bikes, sprinting onto the porch. Noah's hands were shaking as he fumbled with his keys, the distant growl of the car's engine growing louder as the tires skidded against the pavement. The door finally unlocked. We tumbled inside, slamming it shut, locking it. I pressed myself against the wall, heart racing, chest heaving. Ava was crying. Jordan was pacing, hands on his head. Noah pulled back the curtain, peeking through the window. "Oh my God," he whispered. The car was still there. It had stopped at the edge of the driveway. The driver wasn't getting out. He was just sitting there, watching. Minutes passed, then more. The car didn't move. Then, the headlights flicked off. The street went dark. I swallowed, my throat dry. Is he Still there? Noah didn't answer. He sat in the living room, barely breathing, staring at the front window. Every shadow outside looked like it was moving. Every distant sound felt closer than it should have been. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes, it was morning. The sun had risen. The world outside looked normal again. Jordan was curled up in an armchair. Ava was wrapped in a blanket on the floor. I stood up, stretching, my muscles aching. Noah was in the kitchen making coffee, his face still pale. I moved toward the window, peeling back the curtain. The car was gone. For a second, I felt relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe it was just some sick game for the guy, some messed up power trip, and now he was done. Then, I looked down. At the tire marks on the lawn, the ones that hadn't been there before. He'd driven onto the grass at some point during the night. He'd gotten closer. I thought about that as I stared at the empty street, my hands shaking. Who was he? What did he want? And worst of all, was he coming back? I didn't tell anyone about the tire marks on Noah's lawn. Not because I didn't think it mattered, but because I didn't want to admit what I already knew. The man in the car wasn't just some creep looking for a quick scare. He was watching us. He had driven onto the grass in the middle of the night, gotten closer than we realized, and then left before we could catch him. It didn't feel over. It felt like he was testing something, seeing how close he could get before we noticed, before he had to disappear. The thought made me sick, and for days after, I kept checking my own street, watching for that car, waiting for a sign that he had followed me home. But nothing ever showed. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe I was just lucky. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But then I went to Sioux Falls, and I learned that luck had nothing to do with it. Eli and I had agreed to house sit for his uncle that weekend. The guy was some tech entrepreneur, always traveling, always gone, leaving behind a massive house that felt more like a museum than a home. It was modern, built mostly of glass, with huge floor-to-ceiling windows, open concept rooms, and just a little too much space. The kind of place that looked beautiful in the daytime, but turned into something else entirely at night. We got there late Friday afternoon. Max was already waiting on the porch, tossing his keys in the air like he owned the place. "Took you long enough," he said. "Thought I was going to have to break in." Eli rolled his eyes, unlocking the door. "Yeah, 'cause that wouldn't have set off every alarm in the house." I followed them inside, glancing around. The living room was massive, lined with huge glass doors that led out to the backyard, the pool reflecting the early evening sky. The kitchen was sleek, too clean, too polished, like no one had ever actually used it. "This place is insane," Max muttered, spinning in a slow circle. "I mean, who needs this many windows?" Eli shrugged. "My uncle's weird. Thinks it makes the place look artistic or whatever." Max smirked. "Yeah, well, it also makes it look like a fishbowl." He wasn't wrong. At night, all those windows would turn into mirrors, showing everything inside while leaving everything outside hidden. The thought unsettled me, but I shoved it away. We spent the next few hours doing nothing important: video games, trash-talking each other over a bag of chips, scrolling through our phones, the usual. We ordered pizza around 9 p.m., ate way too much of it, then settled in for a long night of doing absolutely nothing. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed in around you. By 1 a.m., I was thirsty. I stood up, stretching, heading toward the kitchen. The house felt different now, the windows like dark, gaping voids, the lights from inside reflecting our movements. I grabbed a glass from the counter, filled it with water, took a sip. Then I froze. Something moved outside. I swallowed, my pulse hammering. The backyard was empty. Just the pool, the patio, the trees swaying beyond the fence. I told myself I was imagining things. Then, a hand pressed against the glass. I dropped the glass. It shattered at my feet. For a second, I just stared, my breath locked in my throat. The hand was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light. Fingers splayed against the window like it was feeling the glass, testing it. My stomach twisted as I followed the shape of the arm, up to the shoulder, up to the face. A man, standing just outside the sliding doors. His clothes were dark, his hood pulled up, obscuring most of his face, except for his mouth. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, and my blood went cold. He had been watching us. For how long? I stumbled backward, my foot crunching over broken glass. The man tilted his head. and then he grabbed the door handle. I spun on my heel. Eli! I heard the rattle of the handle, the soft click, click, click of the lock being tested, and my stomach twisted into knots. Eli and Max burst into the room, half asleep, confused, until they saw the door. Max's face drained of color. Holy! Call the cops! Eli snapped. I was already dialing, my fingers shaking as I fumbled with my phone. The man kept pulling at the handle, harder now, rattling it like he was just waiting for it to break. Then, he took a step back, and I saw something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints outside the window, dozens of them, leading all around the house. He had been circling us for hours. My breath hitched, my hands sweating against my phone. Max grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it like he actually planned to use it. He's not getting in, he muttered, his voice shaking. Eli yanked at the blinds, dragging them down over the windows, blocking the man from view. I wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. Then, a loud bang. We all jumped. Another bang. It was coming from the front door now. My stomach dropped. There were two of them. I could barely hear the operator's voice over the sound of my own heartbeat. There's someone outside, I gasped. They're trying to get in. Officers are on the way, she said, her voice calm. Too calm. The next few minutes stretched into eternity. The banging at the front door stopped, then started again, then stopped. The backyard went silent. Max was gripping the knife so tightly his knuckles were white. Then, the sirens. Flashing red and blue lights flooded the house as two police cars pulled up, officers pouring out with flashlights drawn. I exhaled, my legs going weak. They searched the property. They didn't find him. Or them. But they found something else. Footprints. Hundreds of them. Around the house, around the driveway, even by the bedroom windows. One of the officers shook his head. They've been watching you guys all night. Max turned pale. Jesus! Eli rubbed his face, his fingers still trembling. Who the hell were they? The officer sighed, lowering his flashlight. We've had reports of someone fitting that description breaking into homes around the area. Stalking people first, looking for the right moment. My stomach twisted. Did they take anything? I asked. The officer shook his head. No, they didn't want to rob you. He met my eyes. They wanted to get inside while you were still here. My blood ran cold. That night we boarded up the windows. We slept with the lights on, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The hand on the glass. Pressing, testing, waiting. I didn't think it could get worse after Sioux Falls. After seeing the hand on the glass, the footprints circling the house, the way the man had tested every single door and window while we were inside, but I was wrong. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing, a freak incident, that we had just been unlucky. But bad luck doesn't follow you from town to town, from house to house. That's not luck. That's something else entirely. I didn't tell Zach any of this when I agreed to come over that weekend. I didn't tell Eric or Leo either. I wanted to believe that what happened at Eli's uncle's house was the end of it. I wanted to feel normal again. So when Zach suggested a sleepover at his second-floor apartment in Salt Lake City, I said yes. No hesitation, no paranoia. Just a normal night with friends. At first, that's exactly what it was. We spent most of the evening watching horror movies, stuffing ourselves with junk food and arguing over video games like we were 10 years old again. The apartment was small but cozy, the balcony doors cracked open just enough to let in the cool September air. From up there you could see most of the complex, the parking lot, the small courtyard below, the empty sidewalk stretching out toward the main road. By midnight, we were all feeling a little restless. I dare you to go out on the balcony alone, Eric said, grinning. Zach laughed. Ooh, scary. What's supposed to happen? The ghost of some dead tenant gonna push me off? Leo smirked. Nah, but what if someone's watching you? Zach rolled his eyes and stood up. Fine, I'll do one better. I'll go out there and you guys have to lock me out. I didn't like the idea. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was the fact that I had spent the last month being stalked by things lurking just beyond my sight. But something about locking Zach out there made my stomach twist. Not funny, I muttered. Zach just grinned, stepping out onto the balcony. Leo slid the door shut behind him, locking it with a quick click. We laughed, watching through the glass as Zach rolled his eyes, pretending to bang on the door, mouthing dramatic pleas for help. Then, he stopped. The playful expression on his face faltered. He wasn't looking at us anymore. He was looking down, at the courtyard below. I followed his gaze, my stomach twisting. At first, I didn't see anything, just the dimly lit parking lot, the sidewalk, the shadow of the fence lining the property. Then I saw him. A man, standing just beyond the street lamp's reach, half dipped in the darkness. He wasn't moving, he was just standing there, staring up at Zach. I saw Zach's posture shift, the way his hands tightened on the balcony railing. Then, the man took a step forward, and I saw his face. He was grinning. The same grin I had seen in the car. The same grin I had seen outside the house in Sioux Falls. Cold washed over me. "Let him in," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Leo frowned. "Dude, chill, it's just some... let him in." Something in my voice must have gotten through to him because Leo's smile faded. He unlocked the door, yanking it open just as Zach stumbled inside, his face pale. "Did you see that guy?" he gasped. I nodded. Eric laughed, shaking his head. "Guys, it's probably just some dude walking home." "No!" Zach said, his voice low, shaking. "He wasn't just walking, he was watching me. He was smiling." "Okay, whatever," Leo muttered. "Let's just chill." We tried, we really tried, but something about that moment had shifted the air in the room. We left the blinds closed after that, the balcony door locked, the laughter dying down as the night stretched on. It was 3 a.m. when we heard it, a soft tap, a tap that came from the balcony door. Zach sat up so fast he nearly fell off the couch. We froze. I turned my head slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Another tap. Then, the sound of fingernails dragging against the glass. I wanted to look. Every part of me wanted to look, but I was too scared. Then Zach whispered it. "Oh my God, he's climbing." And suddenly, I wasn't frozen anymore. I grabbed the nearest object. A lamp, clutching it tight as I turned toward the door, and I saw him. His hands gripping the metal railing, his face inches from the glass, that grin still there. Zach screamed. Eric grabbed the baseball bat from the corner, slamming it against the door, his voice shaking. "Get the hell out of here!" The man didn't move, didn't even flinch. He just kept smiling. Then, the sound of sirens. His grin faltered, and just like that, he dropped down. We rushed to the balcony, watching as he sprinted across the courtyard, disappearing into the shadows. The cops arrived minutes later. They searched the complex, the neighboring buildings, the alleyways nearby. They didn't find him, but they found something else. A backpack, left near the fence. Inside, they found duct tape, rope, a knife. I barely heard the officers talking. My ears were ringing, my heart was racing, because I knew he hadn't just planned to watch us, he had planned to get inside, and we had stopped him just in time. That night, none of us slept. The next morning, Zach's parents installed a security system. We never talked about it again, but even now, years later, I still can't walk past a balcony without feeling like someone's watching me from below. Still can't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some city, he's still out there, still watching, still waiting. If there's one thing I want you to take away from these stories, it's this. Danger doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't come with eerie background music or a flashing neon sign that says, "This is where things go wrong." Sometimes it starts with a shadow in the bathroom, a parked car on a quiet street, or a man standing just outside your window, waiting. The world isn't filled with supernatural horrors, but it is filled with people who want to do harm. The terrifying truth is that most of us will encounter something or someone who doesn't have good intentions at least once in our lives. And when that happens, will you be ready? Here are the lessons I've learned from these experiences. Lessons I hope you'll take with you. Trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Your instincts exist for a reason. If a place, a person, or a situation makes you uneasy, remove yourself from it. Lock your doors and windows. It sounds simple, almost too obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people leave them open, assuming nothing bad will happen. The truth is, sometimes the only thing keeping someone out is a locked door. Always let someone know where you are. Whether you're walking home, out for a ride, or house sitting alone, keep someone updated. A quick text could make all the difference if something goes wrong. Never assume you're alone. This isn't to make you paranoid, but the reality is, when you're in a house with large windows, outside at night, or in an isolated area, someone could be watching. Always be aware of your surroundings. If you think you're being followed, never go home. Go to a public place, a friend's house, or even knock on a stranger's door if you have to. Leading someone dangerous back to where you live could put you at risk long after the encounter is over. Call for help sooner rather than later. If you're in danger, don't hesitate. Call the police, alert the people around you. The longer you wait, the worse things can get. These stories aren't just meant to scare you, they're meant to remind you that the world is unpredictable, that bad things don't just happen to other people, they can happen to anyone. But knowledge is power, and the more aware you are, the better prepared you'll be. Belay, I wrap up. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Whether you're new to this channel or you've been here since the beginning, your support means everything. Every comment, like, and share helps this community grow, and I'm beyond grateful to have such an amazing group of people who love these stories as much as I do. You're not just subscribers, you're part of this journey, and I can't wait to keep sharing more chilling, eye-opening tales with you. So stay safe, stay aware, and as always, the unknown is waiting. Until next time, this has been Enigma of the Unknown.